Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by
DHG is a full-service accounting firm serving Memphis and the Mid-South region for more than 60 years, combining community involvement with the technical resources of a national firm. For more information, visit dhgllp.com.
the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The past and future of Memphis in May, tonight on Behind the Headlines. Publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Jim Holt, President and CEO of Memphis in May. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So as we were taping this a little bit early because it's the summer and all that, but you've finished another, for you, I think you said 17th Memphis in May.
Yes.
How'd it go?
It went great. We had a wonderful year this year. The weather behaved the way it should.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of rain during our barbecue. We had glorious weather throughout the month, and the programs were all well attended, well received.
Yeah. The biggest, I guess, sort of news or question it was Sunset Symphony. This was announced as the grand finale of Sunset Symphony. Excuse me. What happens next? Why that decision?
It was a decision our board of directors had made. They had been studying the event for a while. It's our oldest event. It's 39 years old. The attendance hadn't been quite as vibrant as it once was. And next year will be the 40th anniversary for the festival. So the decision was made to introduce a new event in 2016.
Are you going to break some news today and tell us what the new event will be?
Well, I'd like to share it with you, but that's going to be coming later this year.
Later this year.
We haven't decided. We're looking at a number of different particular programs.
Yeah. In making that decision, again, there were 39 Sunset Symphonies, is that correct? And so it's not easy. I mean, and there's a lot of history, a lot of nostalgia, a lot of people who love it. I didn't hear an outcry of anger, but I mean, there's a sense of disappointment.
I think that ran throughout the community, even internally on our staff and board. I mean, it's an event that had great history and heritage. It was much loved. My two daughters are very disappointed in their dad. But it was, in moving forward to the future, the board, I think, made the decision that we want to introduce something new next year, and the 40th anniversary of the festival seemed to be the ideal time.
Just one more question. I know you don't run the symphony, but they've talked about maybe doing something, maybe there's some sort of second life to it, or what do you, I mean, for the symphony, which all symphonies in the country have had a really rough time, I mean, financially. Memphis has, I mean, just been a really rough go through the recession and so on. I mean, what have you heard that they might do next? Again, putting you in the...
I really can't speak on behalf of the symphony, but they've got a very dynamic president who's very hardworking, and I think that he's expressed interest to us that they want to continue. So I think they're trying to put together something similar. And the symphony, I think, currently does perform outdoors 2 or 3 times a summer. So
okay. So let's go through the various parts of it, and we get into some of the history and so on. But Music Fest this year, talk about changes. I mean, you mentioned your daughters, my teenage kids. It was fantastic. I mean, they were so excited about this Music Fest. Some of the bands who are coming. That, I think, was a conscious effort to a bit of a shift in terms of the acts, maybe, or has there been a shift over the last few years?
Well, I think 4 or 5 years ago we looked at going with a little bit more modern talent. And really the thing about the talent booking at the Beale Street Music Festival is largely dependent upon artist availability and routing scenarios.
Routing scenarios being?
When artists are out, where they're out. If someone's touring in South America or Europe, they're not going to play the Beale Street Music Festival. And we work very diligently to put together a lineup of artists that's going to have broad-based appeal to the community. And there is a focus on the younger generation because they tend to be, excuse me, a little bit more active as far as in terms of attendance.
What percentage of the attendees of the Music Fest are from the Memphis area? What percentage are out of town? Or do you even track that?
Oh, no, we do. Over 50% of the attendees are from outside a 200-mile radius.
Really?
So we bring in a great many tourists.
Yeah, and over the years, there's, I mean, do you compete with things like Bonnaroo? Do you compete? I mean, the festival circuit is really interesting now, just from a music point of view. There are festivals all over, Lollapalooza. I mean, all these different things. Do you compete with them, or is that helpful because the acts are moving through various festivals, and this is one great stop for them?
It's incredibly competitive right now. The last count I heard, there was 850 music festivals in North America. So we look at it, given the fact that we have a national audience, we're competing with events in Louisville, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Atlanta. So it's extremely competitive, and there's also competition for the artist.
Yeah, yeah.
I had an agent several years ago. It's just as easy for us to hop on a plane to Memphis as it is to hop on a plane to Barcelona. It's just a little bit a longer flight.
Right.
So, and you have scenarios such as that.
Yeah.
We had, I don't know off the top of my head, but numerous artists that weren't touring that we had fly in to play the festival this year. Band of Horses was one example.
Yeah.
They weren't touring. We thought they'd be a perfect fit with the Avett Brothers.
Right. Well, roughly how many acts were there this year?
We do about 66 artists each year.
Okay. And how many attendees, give or take, for this?
We don't announce attendance figures.
Okay.
But it was right at 100,000 people paid admission this year.
Yeah. Okay. And is it Bill Drees, who couldn't be here today, but he's obviously covered all of this for years. I think he had said to me something that originally the timing was that you followed the New Orleans Jazz Festival. Is that right? Was that, and it's some of the acts, I mean, back to what you're talking about, some acts, it was the timing was, hey, I could do New Orleans and then I could do Memphis, but obviously it's kind of grown out of that stepchild
certainly
sort of relationship.
Well, we've I think the time frame as far as being approximately close to other festivals is very important. We have artists that will share with Jazz Fest. I think this year Ed Sheeran, Lenny Kravitz, Wilco, Hozier, a few other artists.
Yeah.
But there's festivals in South Florida, in the Carolinas that we also will route off of.
Right.
So routing's an important scenario.
Yeah. How much do you weigh, and then we'll move on to some other things, but how much do you weigh, local acts? There's obviously a huge music scene here, and you, I don't know if it's an opportunity to showcase local acts or a responsibility, or how do you balance that in terms of?
Well, the mission of the organization is to promote Memphis culture is one of the elements. And we like to feature the best of Memphis talent. Memphis is very talent deep. It's very talent rich. There's a lot of artists that could play, but we'll take typically about 10 to 15% of the overall bookings at the music festival will feature Memphis artists. And we take the artists that we feel are going to be the next big thing or have the potential to break nationally.
Yeah, yeah. Well, moving barbecue, the contest, Barbecue Fest, how did that go this year?
It was great. We had a little bit of weather issues.
Yeah.
We had some rainfall that kind of dampened the spirit a little bit, but it was a spectacular contest. We crowned a new grand champion. Right. So it was very exciting.
And how many people cooking? How many teams?
We have this year I think it was 244 competition teams.
Wow.
So it's pretty significant, and they, I believe, represented 23 states and 4 foreign countries.
Wow. And when they're doing that, I mean, there's kind of, from a casual attendant kind of point of view, there are people who are there competing, and there are people who are there cooking and hanging out.
There are
and
people
that's
there
part
that
of really
that are competing for the party title.
There we go. Yes, there we go.
But no, you have a mix down there. I think come Friday night, right before the championship judging, everyone gets serious.
I gotcha.
But you have, I would say, out of the 244 teams this year, probably have about 60 serious, significant, hardcore competition teams. They're not there for the party. They're not there for hospitality. They're there to cook and to win.
Yeah. With the originally, I was looking back at some of the history, and again, I was talking with Bill about some of the history of Memphis in May, and in part, I didn't realize that Tom Lee Park was in part expanded for Memphis in May, I guess, and the whole. I didn't realize how small it was. We talked about Music Fest before the show.
Small.
That originally the music festival, the Beale Street Music Festival, was, Bill described it as kind of as in a parking lot.
Well, initially it started. I think Irwin Salke started it back in '77. Yeah. In what is now Handy Park. Yeah. Which was just a vacant lot back then. Right. And they put up a stage and brought in, Beale Street was in disarray and not much was going on there. Put up a stage. I think they brought in B.B. King the first year and some really outstanding blues artists. And then it grew into programming in the park and in the various nightclubs, and was a weekend wristband event, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Back in the mid 80s into the early 90s. In 1990 actually, the focus of the event was placed into Tom Lee Park.
And when did the barbecue come along in there?
The barbecue started in 1978, but it started a parking lot as well. Yeah. in next to the Orpheum Theater. I'm unsure of what year it moved
Right.
to Tom Lee Park.
But all that was coordinated, I mean, and the honoring of a country, which we'll kind of talk about that dynamic. That was there from the beginning as well?
Yes.
That's
yes.
always been sort of central to
Yes.
it.
Oh, very
but it's
much
a funny, you look at it on paper, you came in from outside, you go, there's this great music fest, and there's this great barbecue, and then we honor Poland. Like, how do you know what I mean? It's sort of, okay, yeah, sure, it's Memphis. I mean, that makes total sense here,
Well,
but it's interesting how those three things work together.
Yes, it's extremely diverse, but we honor our local culture, which you look at Memphis' history and heritage, it's all about music and barbecue.
Right.
And we also introduce the culture of a foreign country every year, which I think is incredibly important.
And talk about some of that programming that goes with it, with the honoring of the country, and even we'll start there, and then we'll talk about the selection process and some of the countries have been honored. But
well, we do a three-pronged program. We have a very significant education program that's been recognized with international awards on numerous occasions, where we create a curriculum guide, bring performers into the school, do competitions. So it's quite significant. The cultural program is what most people are aware of. We'll have live performances, exhibits at the Brooks or the Civil Rights Museum, demonstrations, lectures. And then the economic development component is a little bit more muted, but we work very closely with the Greater Memphis Chamber, the U.S. Commercial Service, with the State of Tennessee Economic Development Office, and we'll bring in business leadership to do programs, whether they're luncheons, seminars, where we can exchange information and educate and introduce our business community and make them a little bit more familiar with opportunities that are available in the honored country.
And I didn't realize that the first country, which was Japan, was in part at the time Sharp was looking at putting a plant in Tennessee, and there was some fit with that, right? So it's always had that roots in an economic development.
Well, in the early years, it was very explicit, very focused on that. Now, I wasn't involved with the festival. Lyman Aldridge, who was the first president of the festival, indicated that the focus was almost completely, entirely on economic development. And you look at the first 3 or 4 countries that were saluted, they're the largest trade partners with the city of Memphis and the state of Tennessee. Japan, Germany, Canada, Great Britain. Mexico.
So and now when you go, you'll begin the process, I assume, of looking at which country we honored. How does that process work?
We have a international selection committee that's comprised of members of our board of directors, as well as community leaders from the arts and cultural community, from the business community, and from the educational community. And they'll do comprehensive research into typically between 15 and 20 different countries, narrow the selection down to 4 to 6 finalists, and then we make inquiries through the embassies in Washington to determine the level of interest. And we'll travel there, meet with them to go through the program a little further. And if there's expressed interest from the embassy, that committee then takes that data and makes a determination on who will be honored. And we extend an invitation. So it's a lengthy process.
Yeah. The back to Tom Lee Park, and I was going to go in a different direction with that, which was when the festival moved down there originally, it was probably at a time when the downtown was not in good shape. I mean, it was in that kind of still a low. Things were still barely beginning to recover. Now downtown is totally different. I mean, and I've heard some people talk about, well, you know, we'd like to use the park during May. Maybe Memphis in May should be somewhere else or not dominate downtown. I'm sure the downtown merchants are, you know, screaming right now saying, you know, be quiet, Eric. But people have raised those sort of questions, right? I mean, about is it the right thing for Tom Lee Park to have it taken up for what some people have said, I mean some, for a full month? Your thoughts on that? I mean,
it's not really taken up for a full month, and of course next year with the Sunset Symphony going away, it will be less than a month. You know, most cities across America, if they're doing major events, they want to bring their people together, and if they're on a river, being on a waterfront is a popular place to have an event. It's an attraction. The inconvenience, say, of a 3 or 4 week period, I think pales in comparison to the economic development and what we do as far as in terms of positioning the city nationally and internationally.
Yeah. Economic development, you guys measure that? What
Absolutely.
Sort of, yeah.
Absolutely. I don't have current figures for this year's festival.
Sure.
We haven't done that yet. But the most recent study that the University of Memphis, Sparks Bureau of Economic Research, I think pegged us at about $70 million.
Yeah.
And that's fairly significant. I think the festival activities and events support approximately the equivalency of 600 full-time jobs.
Really? On an annualized basis or for that month?
On an annualized basis.
Really?
Yes.
So that's everything from support staff, putting up the stages, but just all of that?
All the vendors that we utilize, whether they're a lighting company, electrical contractor, trash removal, merchandise.
Yeah.
This year we operated with a budget of a little bit over $8 million. Mm-hmm. We have 14 full-time staff members, and we support a lot of local businesses.
Right. A couple years ago, you did the barbecue. I'm sure it was. I can't imagine the stress when you had to move barbecue festival over to Tiger Lane.
To Tiger Lane.
Some people liked being up there. They
did.
There were multiple points of access and so on. Did you ever think, hey, this was great. We should do it over here again?
Oh no. And in fact, it was interesting that year. They did enjoy it very much, and we actually surveyed the teams after the event that year.
Yeah.
To get their input, because there was discussion, should we move it on a permanent basis? And while the teams loved having the hardscape that's available at Tiger Lane and the convenience of that, they missed the ambiance of being on the river.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. We actually surveyed and conducted a vote. Would you like to return to Tiger Lane? Would you prefer to be back in Tomley Park? And I think anyone who's attended the events in Tomley Park, it's a beautiful, fantastic setting for an event. If the weather's nice.
Right.
If it's rainy, it gets a little muddy.
Yeah.
And it gets a little messy.
Yeah.
So
how do you deal? I mean, people. How do you deal with the weather? How do you? I just can't imagine the stress that you all feel in April going into May, because this huge element is completely beyond your control.
Well, we prepare for it, but it's out of our hands.
Yeah.
I really don't worry about it too much. It's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're prepared we have contingency plans in place if weather arises, and we hope that it doesn't, but it's not in our hands.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever thought about moving? I mean, Memphis in May makes sense, but I mean, I've heard people say that before. Statistically they ought to shift it or whatever, but are you just...
It's a matter of who can predict weather.
Right.
There was a situation about 8 or 10 years ago, a major festival in Atlanta had gone through a period where had rain every year, just as we had, and the director of the festival said, I'm going to move it to June. Weather patterns have changed. We're going to go to June. And they moved the festival to June.
We know where this is going.
And they had the largest tropical storm move in over Atlanta and more rain than ever before. So you can't, the last 4 years, we've been rain-free 3 of the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So I looked at this year, and the weather for the symphony and for the music festival is near perfection.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned to many people, this is why the festival was started in May. This is prototypical May weather.
Well, and you go into June or July, and you're suddenly it's just baking.
very hot.
And so on.
Yes.
But it is a remarkable thing. I mean, I will say when in May, when the Grizzlies are, let's say, in the playoffs, and you go downtown, and there's just this unbelievable amount of activity down there, from the Grizzlies to what's happening with Memphis in May, and just the restaurants and all this kind of stuff. And so that sort of concentration is really fantastic, where you go, this is why I live here, because this city can do these really great kind of things. So, anyway,
I don't know how many people have told me over the years that May is their favorite month of the year because of the level of activity, and other people that had maybe moved away and said, I always come back during May.
Yeah.
Because of the activity and excitement. And I think that's important.
Did you ever think about doing a Memphis in September? I mean, you guys must have tossed around the idea of we could do, it is so well attended and it's such an institution. Is there if not equivalent thing, but some things we could do in the fall months or something? I mean,
we've looked at that and had discussions, and we're looking at the possibility of doing some events. Probably the most optimal time frame would be in October.
Yeah, yeah.
But certainly if the right situation or the right event pops up, we're very receptive to that.
And do you look at things like, so I've lived here, 20 years. When I moved here, there were, 5 restaurants or something. Now there are all these restaurants, microbrew. We were a little late nationally yet, but now you've got all these microbrews. Do you look at those kinds of things and say, hey, those are new things happening in Memphis. We don't want to, walk away from the barbecue fest, but boy, it'd be interesting to get food trucks. And do you try to figure out ways that you can integrate things that are happening in Memphis into the festival?
That's one of the reasons we're introducing some new events next year.
Okay, all right. See, I'm getting there. You're going to break some news. You're going to break some news. I'm going to twist it out of you.
No, but I mean, things have changed. There's a lot of exciting developments taking place around the country.
Yeah. Okay. Just 5 to 6 minutes left here. I was going back through the history of Memphis with Bill, and one thing he said is, oh, yeah, they used to always have a tattoo. And I said, they had a tattoo festival? I mean, I couldn't understand what he was saying. He said, no. It was the military parade and reenactment, and talk about those.
Well, that was before my time.
Okay.
I think the festival has always looked, the events within the festival that celebrate our culture, the music and the barbecue are extremely well attended. On international events, they tend to be more concentrated and small in nature, and the board of directors wanted to do a large, majestic, major international event. And they came up with the concept of doing the military tattoos, which are very big internationally. I believe it was done for 2, maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
It was extremely expensive. And didn't resonate with the public.
Well, I will tell you, though, that Bill said, and Bill's not one to exaggerate, but he said the Turkish one, he said, was just truly remarkable. I mean, and I think it sounded very expensive as well.
It was very, very expensive. And, I saw a photograph last night Cynthia Ham, the former executive director, had sent to me. And it was spectacular. They had to have 150, 200 performers on the floor of the pyramid. So it was a wonderful event that just didn't attract the level of response necessary to sustain it.
When you think about downtown, you think about, I've talked about things changing, you've got the Beale Street landing. Is this the second year that's been open, or the first or second year, I guess, that's been open during the festival?
I think probably the second.
Yeah. With more cruise ships coming in, I mean, how is that a great thing, a good thing? I think they weren't able to dock at Beale Street Landing during a couple of the events, but do you look at that? I know it's outside your purview, but and say, hey, that's great. I mean, we need to figure out how to get some of these, people, because they're talking about getting up to maybe 4 or more separate cruise ship lines using Beale Street Landing over the next couple of years. How do you interact with that?
Well, the RDC controls the waterfront.
Right.
So that's really their domain, and we don't have much level of involvement. It's my understanding, however, that there's 3 or 4 different locales where the cruise ships can dock. They utilize the landing, but you have the Greenbelt Park, which I understand works very well.
Right.
And then they have the dock that they used to use at Mud Island. So there's numerous options during the time frames when we have events, which when you look at the music festival and barbecue, you're really talking about a total of 7 days.
Yeah.
And I believe that they've had some riverboats that have actually come in and docked on event days.
Yeah. It must be great. I mean, if you're getting, you're walking into this incredible festival that you didn't know you were going to be walking into. Again, things like Bass Pro. I mean, they're talking about how many hundreds of thousands of people, 1 million people a year. Do you look at that and say that's great, or are you so separate from that?
Well, we're separate from that, but I think all those elements that add and enhance the quality of life and attract tourists to our city are very important. What we've found is that people will come and attend our events because they're attractive events, but they also look for other opportunities.
Right.
What else am I going to do while I'm here?
Right. Yeah.
I want to go to do this. I was just in Norfolk last week for a meeting, and there was a festival going on, and I, did a cruise of the Naval Yard, and I went into the Old Town area there.
Right.
So people look at. I've always wanted to go to Graceland, or I've heard Beale Street's fun, and the ribs are great there. Let's go check out the Rendezvous.
Right.
So we, with our various events, will provide the rationale. We're going to go for this, and we're going to go do this, this, and that.
Yeah.
So Bass Pro is another element that's going to add to the desirability of someone traveling to Memphis. Let's go to Bass Pro. I was down there, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was incredible the amount of crowd that they had in there just checking it out. It's really a wonderful, incredible retail operation.
It'll be amazing when the Harahan Bridge opens. I mean, that'll be an incredible view looking back that people, and I guess that hopefully, I can't remember the timing, if that'll be open before the next May That might be another year and a half before
Yes,
that's
I think
open.
it's going to be 17
But
probably.
yeah, those sorts of connections. The posters, just it's an interesting thing. The history of those posters and the people who have talk about some of the people who have worked on those posters. Just a minute left here.
We've had just a who's who of Memphis artists that have commemorated the various countries we've honored each year. It started, I believe, in the early 80s. It started as a fundraiser. One of the board members said, you know, let's do a poster, commission a painting for our country. Yeah. And they're in collections, you know, homes, offices, government installations around the world. And we now have, thanks to support from the Plow Foundation and the Scheidt Foundation, we have an exhibit on display out at the Memphis International Airport of the original works of art. But they featured, it's just Carol Clore.
Yeah. I won't put you on the spot with the names, but it really is a neat thing. And I remember when I moved here, you'd see these posters around, and there were all these different Memphis May ones, and you suddenly realized there was something a little more significant going on than just a poster. But we're out of time. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We look forward to some news on what happens
We have an
next.
exciting year. Next year, it's the 40th anniversary.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.
DHG is a full-service accounting firm serving Memphis and the Mid-South region for more than 60 years, combining community involvement with the technical resources of a national firm. For more information, visit dhgllp.com.